Hello, fellow Dreamcatchers. We are back in the Haven to discuss another wonderfully written book by one of my personal favorite authors, Sandra Manigault. Sandra has penned her third novel, Flora, Saga, which is book 3 in the Vanessa Trilogy. My Dreamcatchers may remember Sandra joining us in the Haven in seasons 1 and 3 when we first were introduced to the delicious characters encompassed in this trilogy. And you're probably very happy to hear that there's a third offering. So without further ado, let's welcome Sandra back to the Haven. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
It is so good to have you
Thank
back.
you.
And
Thank
you know, I don't know if you remember, you probably do. When you were here, season 1, and probably in season 3 when you were talking about those books, I knew that you would be back, but I felt that you weren't really sure what that third book was going to be about, or what, you know, how it was going to take form, at least at the time that we taped it. So let's do a deep dive into these characters and to your whole writer's game. Talk to me about Flora Saga.
Okay. Flora Saga is interesting. I wasn't planning to even do a sequel to Vanessa Love Story. And I remember one or two women saying to me, "You can't stop here. I want to know what's going to happen to her."
Yeah.
Because after all, love stories are supposed to end a certain way, and mine didn't. So there was the sequel. And honestly, Valerie, when I was first writing the sequel, I had to ask myself, wow, something seems different.
And
Is
to be
this
clear,
Yeah.
you're talking about
book
this
2.
Book 2.
Yeah, I honestly had to ask myself, is this the same Vanessa who was in book 1? Because it was as if she was different. And it took me a while to kind of get my head around the fact that it's the same Vanessa, she's just grown up some. And the way she interacts with men's a little different now. She's not going to do in book 2 what she did in book 1.
Right.
You know, get swallowed up by the sky. You know?
Yeah, and I think that that is what is so interesting about your characters overall. Not just Vanessa, but just their development as people, as women, through their experiences in the book. And we just kind of trail along with them. And that's why, you know, people are like, when is the next book coming? When is the next book coming? People contacting me is, when is she coming up? Because they know when you're coming on, it's because you have a new book. So how did you finally get to a place to write with a level of authenticity with regard to the character?
I'm not sure. But you know, one of the things I do, I don't follow the rules. And when I hear about other authors, you know, you need a story arc, you need an outline, you need to know how the book is going to end before you start. I don't know what they're talking about, and I don't do it. And when I get in workshops or sessions with women who abide by the rules and they're trying to do what the experts say they should do, I can't stay, because that's not how I write. And I figure if I try to write like that, I'm going to get all messed up. So I don't do it.
Yeah, there really is no set in stone process of writing, because all of us are inspired in different ways. Our process is different. You know, that the pansters do it a certain way, whereas the plotters like myself, you know, looking at how a panster writes would drive me nuts. But in my plotting of how I'm going to put the story together, there is a level of pansters that's going on, because you have to be willing to listen to the characters.
You do.
And they may take you in other directions that you may not have plotted them to go, but that's where the authenticity.
Well,
of
the
character
interesting
comes
thing
in.
about the process is that I don't know how the plotters can plot knowing what the characters are going to do if the characters are telling the story. How do you know?
Well, you're plotting based on what the characters are telling you. You're just a scribe.
Yes, but if you're a scribe, you're listening to them as their story unfolds. So how do you, on page 35, know what's going to happen by page 110? Hasn't happened yet. And they've got to live through that. They've got to get from where they are on page 35 to where they're going to be at page 110. And how do you know? Because they don't know who they're going to meet and how they're going to interact with who they're going to meet and what's going to happen and how they're going to react. So you literally are letting them tell the story, and you're listening to them tell the story.
Yeah.
And it sounds really bizarre, but that's what happens. But that's not the only thing you do. I think about one of my editors, the best of my editors, who is a wonderful person. I wish I could kind of like live joined to the hip with her, and then we could really get some stuff done. And I remember, for example, in Flora Saga, the first thing she said to me about one of the characters, very early on, she said, "He's not ready." And I thought to myself, no, because his story is unfolding and he's talking and interacting with Flora, but I didn't realize he wasn't ready, but she could see that in his conversation. And then later on in the book, when there is another character introduced, I didn't know how to get them where I needed them to be. And she said, "Why don't you let such and such happen?" And I said, "Oh no, I don't want that to happen." And then I thought about it, and I said, "Okay, I will." But then I had to figure out the how of it. And you see, I'm trying not to tell you too much, but do you want to know?
Sure. Our audience probably wants to know.
Oh, I don't know if I want them to know. I don't mind you knowing.
Oh,
but
okay.
It's okay, okay. Okay, well, I'll give you a little hint. She says, "What if he has an accident?" And I really didn't want him to have an accident because I didn't want anything to happen to him.
You're fighting with the, well, okay.
I'm fighting with the advice.
Yes, not necessarily what the character's
then in
telling
terms of how it was going to happen and when it was going to happen,
Yeah.
it was perfect timing. So it happened. And it actually brought the characters closer together.
So it happened organically versus being forced and all of that. And then that's always the best
No, I
way.
really listen to them. And I think one of the things, you know, I think when you're a writer, I think it's a gift, particularly if you can write authentically and write fast, and I think I do. But the other piece of it is you want the characters to tell the story, which means you've got to be good at dialogue. And I think that's a gift, and I'm very grateful for that gift. And so as the characters are telling the story, they're growing, and you can see things develop. And I think one thing about process, I find when I'm writing, particularly when I'm almost done with the first draft of a book, I'm constantly reading it through again, over and over and over, because a lot is going on, and I just want to make sure that the relationship that's being developed is authentic,
right to the character,
is believable, and is true to the characters. So, did I ever answer the first question?
That's what
Yeah.
you feel has come across in Flora Saga.
Oh, definitely.
And definitely in your other two
Yeah.
earlier books.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to focus on Flora?
Well, you know, she shows up in book 1, and we know that she's Vanessa's best friend in book 1, and she really helps Vanessa keep it together, because Vanessa's kind of all over the place.
I love Flora's personality.
Yes, and she is so down to earth. She's direct, she's strong, and she's a beautiful person inside and out. And so it's just important. She's pivotal in that first book, and she's there more than once in that first book. In the second book, what happens is she is more of a dominant character. Vanessa is still primary, but Flora is there, and Flora forms a relationship of her own probably about midway through, and that relationship grows. And so we know Vanessa has a wonderful ending in book 2, and Flora is really just getting started in her relationship.
So
And
it's
I
kind
just
of a
felt-
handing off of the baton, so to speak.
Kind of. But I also think Flora deserved her own platform. She deserved her own story, because we want to know, well, is she successful? Is this relationship going to work? And so it starts in book 2, and it continues. She becomes primary in book 3. But you know, one of the other things I've noticed, a number of authors write, I'm not going to say they write necessarily what I would call legacy novels, but they keep going from one generation to the next to the next. I don't
Of the
think
same characters?
No, of a family. a family of characters. At least there was one series I read like that. And I thought, this is interesting. And I didn't want to do that, because that requires plotting. Okay. But I did want there to be some continual development. And so you have a certain body of characters in book 1. You carry some of them over in book 2. You add characters in book 2. You carry some of those over into book 3. But also I brought back somebody, a couple of people at least, from book 1 we see again in book 3. So you keep building. You build and build. But Flora really needed her own story. And she deserved that. And her journey, as much of a roller coaster as Vanessa's was, Flora's is more so.
She's a very interesting character.
She is. She is.
So let's talk about your passion for writing overall. What inspired you to sit down initially to write your first book?
The first novel, the very first book. First novel. A creative writing class.
Okay.
With a phenomenal teacher.
I remember that.
And you know what's peculiar about that is there are teachers and they're teachers. Not everyone can teach courses in creativity, and you've got to be very careful, because if you get the wrong teacher in a creative course, they'll mess you up.
Okay.
I've seen that.
So
I've seen that.
You were inspired to pen your first book based on your experience and what you learned
based
in the
on a homework
class.
assignment. A homework assignment. There were several things from which to choose, and I chose the option of writing a scene in which sex was or was not the inevitable outcome. First 2 chapters of Vanessa Love Story. Didn't know that was going to happen, but it happened. And the strange thing about that, when the scene came together where there was a turning point, are they going to have sex or not? I didn't know how to write a sex scene, and I was scared to death, and I didn't know what to say. And so I remember saying, time stopped on the wall, and then I went on to the next scene, and one of the men in class tore me a new one. He said, you cannot stop there. You just cannot stop there. And I thought to myself, and so eventually, before the book went on, I said, okay, if you're going to write a love scene, you're just going to have to dive in and just do it.
Yeah,
and not be afraid to do it.
And I've talked to a lot of different novelists about sex in their books, and how far to take it, or just to kind of give the reader the sense that it happened. And many times they say, well, how important is it to the story? So if it's a story about someone being unfaithful, then making it as hot as possible is probably not a bad thing. But if it's something that isn't very critical or pivotal to the overall story, I mean, you can still make it hot and steamy if you want, but you really want to focus on the story and not so much the scene and that was advice that was given to me, like, how far do you go, and the basis being how important is it to the story. But I don't want to get too far from talking about your passion for writing, which is what I really want to focus on. So you started writing your first novel and finishing it based on that experience in the writer's class. And you finished it. What compelled you to continue with this particular story versus, you cut your teeth and now, maybe introduce new characters? What was it about this character and her storyline that compelled you to not write 1, 2, but actually 3 books in the series?
Well, basically, everyone wanted to know what happened to Vanessa.
Okay.
So we had to fix that. And so I just determined that, okay, let's put Vanessa in her new life. And we see her transitioning from her old life to her new life at the end of book 1.
So it wasn't so much that you entered into this writing journey with Vanessa with the idea
Not
that
at
you're going to
all.
write a series?
Not at all.
Okay, perfect.
Not at all.
Because that's one thing that I really want our viewers to hear from a writer who's an accomplished writer who's done it and who has been very successful in doing it. You know, many times we write not thinking, hey, this is one in a series of books, 2, 3, 5 books. Sometimes it just organically happens that way, and that's okay.
I think that's a good way for it to happen. That's authentic, because I think you have to be motivated to care enough about the characters yourself, to write about them in a way that they're going to show up as real people in book 2 or book 3. And I wasn't planning to do a sequel, but once I got started with the sequel, it wasn't difficult to do. It was a matter of pulling in the new people. And what's very interesting in book 2 is that we see the two friends together, and they're planning to go out for an evening. They've been invited to a birthday party. They meet. Each one meets her dream man on the same day. And Vanessa's relationship takes off like a rocket. Flora's does not, but Flora is a lot more methodical in her interactions with men than is Vanessa. Vanessa's the more spontaneous, free-spirited one. But I think also, as the story unfolds, you see relationships developing at different paces, which is what normally happens between people. And it's just a matter of realizing that, okay, this one is coming to a close, this one is not, and then you just continue on with it.
Okay.
Did we get to the original question?
You 100,000% answered my question. So I guess, you know, the point, there are some writers that write for series because they'll end their book intentionally the way that they ended it, because they know that they're going to pick up a certain way in the second book. But in this case, which I love, it happened organically. You did not go into it knowing, thinking. So what about from book 2 to book 3?
Yeah, interesting.
Same thing?
What's interesting, not only does one continue, book 3 starts before book 2 has ended. In that final scene in book 2, book 3 is already beginning. So, but again, it picks up from there. Again, you don't really know how it's going to.
That's the beauty of writing.
Yeah,
I love it.
I think because of how I write, I don't really know what's going to happen until I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
And that it's just peculiar. Valerie, a peculiar way to write.
I think it's just so artistic.
And yet a lot happens in the development of the characters.
Yeah,
you know, and so you see, in book 3, you see Vanessa taking a back seat. She is there, but she is there only in the background. You know, and she comes forward and then she goes in the background again.
She moves to a main character to a supporting character.
She is, very much so.
So, just staying on your passion for writing, one thing that you said earlier that I just want to expound on, and honestly I can't remember if you said it on or off the air, going back to my issue about talking about it before we're actually taping, you mentioned something about the 3 books and your process for each one, or maybe I asked you that question. How much has your writing process changed between the 3 books?
Interesting question. I don't know if it's changed that much.
You got a blueprint, stay with it, it ain't broken, why fix it?
Yeah, I do.
How have you developed as a writer?
I think I've gotten better. I think when people, particularly people who are helping me edit the books, I know when we got to Flora Saga, each one was telling me, I loved it, I loved the characters, fell in love with the books. And I'm happy to hear that, because I don't really know how people are going to respond. I only know whether I like it or not. I have to also tell you something. Although I am essentially done with the Vanessa series.
Are you?
Not quite.
Okay, I was about to say, did you all hear that?
There's a fourth book. There's a fourth book, but it's not part of the trilogy. The trilogy where these two women are pivotal characters, that's done, but there is something slipped into book 3.
Okay.
And that is regarding Flora. We didn't know Flora had twin sisters.
Oh.
And so book 4 is really the story of the twin sisters.
Okay, so Dreamcatchers, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
There is a 4th book coming. And it's going to be about Flora's twin
sisters, which the nice thing about it, of course, because they're identical twins and because there are 2 people, we're not looking at one love story, we're looking at 2.
Okay.
And so it's interesting.
So you have started straight to my last question.
Yeah.
which we can continue.
Yeah.
Okay, so your current project or your soon-to-be project, I don't know if you started writing, is book 4. What comes first for you, a working title or the title?
Good question.
Because sometimes, for me, I don't know why, and I've talked to other authors and it totally doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
I have the name of the book before I get to the end of chapter 1.
Really?
Of writing,
I think I've done that too.
It's kind of, because it's like we're feeling it and we know what it's going to be about, and so, sometimes it comes to me in a dream, sometimes I'm not even really thinking about it and it pops in my head as I'm writing the first chapter. But anyway,
interesting.
How does that work for you?
Book 2, I had no title. Book was finished. I had to run a little contest and have my readers give me titles.
I remember that.
It was
yes,
crazy.
That was a lot of fun, actually.
That's where the title came from for book 2. Book 4 had the title at the beginning, The Between Years.
The Between Years?
The Between Years.
Okay.
The story of Yvette and Dominique.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the, and thank you for sharing your process between the 3 books, because I often wonder about that with writers who are, you're writing, you're basically a full-time writer. Would you say that?
I don't know. That's what I
more than part-time.
That's the only thing I do at this point.
Okay.
Because I'm retired
more than
from
part-time.
teaching. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the business of it, because I know a lot of our Dreamcatchers ask questions about that. I get it all the time, particularly writers who are publishing their own books, which is becoming more of the norm.
It is.
I think for various reasons, because there's so many ways and so many resources out there that will absolutely allow you to, without a lot of money, get that first book out into the universe. So talk to us about your journey as a publisher, because you publish your own books, and how much of it has changed from your first to your current.
I don't think, for me, the process hasn't changed that much because I'm always very timid about trying a lot of different things.
Okay.
So I've always published hard copy books. And I realized that I'm probably going to have to go back to some of the people who helped me get the book out there and say, okay, now it's time for us to try something different. Can we add another format to this? And I'm thinking about doing that with Flora Saga and possibly with the first Vanessa book also, since I'm sure they still have all my stuff in their database someplace.
Yeah, especially since a lot of people are moving to electronic access to that media.
Exactly, yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that you're thinking of moving.
I am. And I think you just have to kind of wrap your brain around, some paradigms in terms of how to get the book distributed and where you want it to go, and just be content with the fact that you're getting publicity, even if you're not making thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Because I think everyone thinks I'm going to write a book, it's going to be a bestseller, I'm going to, be on the New York Times, Washington Post bestseller list.
First coming out the gate.
Oh gosh, doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
It has.
It has, but it's rare. It's rare. And I think when you look at the number of books out there, there are so many thousands of books being published every single year that you're just, you're just in there with the mix of other people.
Are you on any other outlets? You know, some writers will write articles for mags and other publications, online publications.
Haven't
have you
done
thought
that
about
yet.
that? Okay, okay, because that's another great way to get your name out there, to get your work out there, to promote your brand, and that really goes a long way in terms of social media.
Sure.
So, you know,
I know. I've got a lot to learn with the business end of it. I wish I knew as much about promoting and marketing books as I do about writing books. Writing is the easy part. And everyone who's ever wanted to write a book.
Writing is the easy part?
Writing is the easy part.
Okay.
Very easy.
Okay.
Yeah. It's you know, and I'm amazed with women who are phenomenal at marketing. They got one book, but they're phenomenal at marketing. And I'm wondering, why aren't you, marketing 6 or 7 books? And they're not. They're just doing one. And I guess they're just those of us who can write the books fast. Someone asked me a couple of months ago, how long does it take to write a book? And I kind of shrug my shoulders. I say maybe 9 months. And when I say that, I don't mean thinking about it, writing. I mean start to finish, done, draft, finished.
There's actually going to be an author who's going to be on the Where cruise, the Writers and Readers Escape cruise that I'm going to talk about in a minute when we close out the show, who has a book about how to write a book in 30 days.
Wow.
Victor McLaughlin, you've probably heard of him. He's a New York Times best-selling author, and he's going to be on that voyage with us, and he's actually going to do a workshop on how to do that and have copies of his books available.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for
so
coming
much.
on and sharing your artistry and your creativity with us.
Of
I look forward to having you back to talk about your 4th book and unpack the layers about some other stuff that we didn't have enough time to talk about, but we will.
I know.
And Dreamcatchers, thanks for tuning in and being a big part of the Haven Circle. It is my hope that you are inspired in your writer's journey as we peel back the layers and get to the heart of this writer's game. I hope the season continues to inspire you to finish your book, your script, or at the very least helping you to lay down the tracks to completion. And as always, you can stream us on any of our 9 streaming platforms, including iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Alexa, Spreaker, YouTube, and the #1 network on the continent, American Legacy Network. So for more information on where to tune into our broadcasts or podcasts, visit our website at www.writershavenshow.com. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Author V. Helena, or on Facebook at V. Helena. Keep me posted on your progress, and perhaps I'll see you in the Haven. Now, I want to share some exciting news that many of you have already heard, but I want to make sure everyone has the information. The Haven is going international in a very big way. Phoenix Rising Entertainment has partnered with Virgin Voyages to host a Writers and Readers Escape aboard the Scarlet Lady. It's an opportunity for writers to retreat into their work and for readers to hobnob with some of their favorite authors. There'll be literary cafes, there'll be master classes, a whole host of things that will support you in your writer's journey. So just tune in to our website at www.writershavenshow.com to check out the deets. And I hope to see, and that's SEA, I hope to see you there. That's all for now, and until next time, catch fire on purpose.